Hi guys, it's Seven here from Helix ER, and today we are doing a very special interview with the director of Once Upon a Time in Peekskill. It is a new VR movie that is a true life story about a boy that was wrongly convicted of rape and murder of his fellow classmate. And we've actually got the person that the story is about with us as well. He served 16 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit, so we're going to have a chat with him as well. And all this is all done in VR, guys. The story is in VR. You should go out and buy it. Check it out. Chapter 1 is available now. It is really, really good. It's an interactive movie. Anyway, we'll tell you more about that. But before we do, let's have a look at the movie.
Don't you go talking to the cops by yourself.
Why not?
Because that's how it is, and that's what I'm telling you to do.
I don't have a choice. And besides, I might actually be able to help them out.
You don't get it. These cops aren't on your side. You think they picked you up today because they need your help?
Maybe. Maybe not, but what difference does it make if me helping them out gets them closer to solving this thing?
Jeffrey, hon, don't be stupid. They don't give a damn about you. They probably think you killed that girl.
I didn't kill that girl!
Jeff, just listen to what the lawyer said today and don't talk to the cops anymore.
Whatever.
No.
Okay, that was a quick scene. Looks riveting. So let me welcome my guests. Ramon, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
And you are the director of this movie?
Yeah, I'm the writer, director, and I also actually did the programming for this, so also the developer.
Excellent. And we've got the man that the story is inspired by, based on true events. We've got Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for turning up. So let's go to you, Jeff. This story is inspired by true events. If you want to just quickly explain to the viewers what actually happened.
Sure. So when I was in 1990 and I was in high school, I was 16 years old, and I was arrested for a murder and rape, which I didn't commit. Ultimately, I wound up spending 16 years in prison prior to DNA testing showing my innocence.
1990, it doesn't seem that long ago, really, in the stretch of things. And you spent 16 years incarcerated for a crime you didn't commit, and that's what this story is basically about.
That is correct.
So, I mean, in those 16 years, obviously, things have changed a lot, and we're able to tell your story in a virtual environment. I mean, how does that feel?
It almost doesn't seem possible. It seems like I'm living in a sci-fi movie. To give you an idea of how much the technology was different from the time I was arrested until now, GPS, cell phones, and internet hadn't been created. I remember watching in 1997-98, the president allowed us to have television in the cell, and there was a episode, there was Star Trek Voyager, a series, and they had this device called a holodeck, and it was virtual reality, but like maybe times 10. You could walk around and use characters you could program, and you almost couldn't tell the difference when you were in it, per the Sci-Fi Channel. And really, this virtual reality is simply one step, maybe one or two steps below that. It's almost the same thing. It's incredible.
It's very, very close to what they envisaged on those Star Trek TV shows. We're catching up with technology a lot quicker than they can even think about things that are going to be happening in the future, which is crazy. So Ramon, you obviously wrote, directed. What brought you to want to make this story?
Well, one of the things that I've done over the years in terms of filmmaking, not VR per se, is really tackle various different social issues, anything from immigration to mass incarceration, and obviously now wrongful convictions. And I actually I got to know Jeff on a different project that actually was it was a narrative-based short series that was focused on solitary confinement here in the United States. And as I just got to know Jeff even more, and really got to really get a richer understanding of his story. It just kind of logically made sense. And there's also with this particular story, there's you can go on and Google, Jeffrey Deskovic, and you'll obviously find a plethora of information. But there are various little, nuts and bolts that kind of had to be in play for all of these events to unfold, and for eventually to get this false confession, and eventually get this conviction that we all know was unjust from the get-go. And so having those little nuts and bolts really allowed for more story, really, that people don't know. And I actually try to use a lot of those kind of nuances in the interactivity of this project. So just the nature of what the subject matter dealt with. Jeffrey himself, I mean, he's a huge advocate, and he actually has, one of the really greater, stories of, really being beat down by society, and having an amazing turnaround, and the success that he's had as an advocate, as well as now being an attorney, and helping to stop these wrongful convictions. I mean, it's just an amazing story, and because there's all these little, like I mentioned, little nuts and bolts that people don't know about, it also adds for this additional layer for people to kind of uncover through some of these interactive moments. So it just all kind of clicked in every sense possible.
So what made you do it in VR? What made you think, rather than just do it on a 2D flat screen cinema, what made you want to bring the story into a VR environment?
Yeah, that's actually a very easy one to answer. One of the things that I have always strived for is creating a deeper sense of empathy between my viewers and the subject matter of whatever the film or video project is. As well as really trying to immerse viewers into the story worlds that I'm creating. And when I actually first got my VR headset a few years ago, I actually started with the PSVR, and I mean, immediately I was just blown away, as I'm sure many of the VR enthusiasts that are listening to this were as well when they first got their headsets. And it just immediately became clear to me. It's like, wait, this is really next level immersion. If you can start with a powerful story that's already engaging and immersive enough, then the ability to actually put the viewer into that world can only help strengthen and heighten that immersion. And it also it helps with the creation of empathy, because you in this particular chapter of Jeffrey's story, I mean, you are literally just feet away from him through these various moments that kind of that start this eventual downfall of this young teen. So really it's the ability to create a much richer, immersive environment, a more intimate environment, which ultimately leads to creating a greater sense of empathy. And I really, at this point in time, I cannot think of a better media tool than VR to achieve both greater immersion and greater empathy. And if there is one, I will certainly be exploring that when it comes around.
I've watched obviously chapter 1 already, and it definitely changes the way that you feel about the person just from watching it from a two-dimensional, where you haven't got a connection. You've got more of a connection with the character. So Jeff, obviously the story is about you, and I take it you've seen that the story in VR. How does it feel from your point of view, actually seeing these great actors playing you and going through the story? How does that feel to you, to see that all happening?
Yeah, it feels kind of surreal. It feels kind of incredible, but at the same time, it does feel gratifying, because I often use my story to raise awareness about the problem of wrongful conviction. Because while my story is horrendous, I'm just one story out of many stories out there, and that's why I do speaking and media interviews in general. So I feel happy that that my story is used in this way, just through this new platform that say somebody that somebody's more is prefers to see somebody in person, or just art. People you reach to people with stories through different ways. So I mean, VR, I'm sure, has its own fan base, and so I look at it like people are being reached that otherwise would not be reached.
The first chapter is released now. How many chapters are there going to be in the story?
So the first, there's I've kind of mapped it out in terms of the I guess the key timelines in this larger story of Jeffrey's life. So this particular segment, which is obviously the teen years, which is where we start. The idea was to go from the day of the actual murder happening, and then ending it with the eventual forced confession by Jeffrey. And so that has been mapped out to a total of 3 chapters. We have one that's released, and then there'll be 2 more to follow, which ultimately get us into the main saga that or the ends that first saga, which is the arrest of Jeffrey and the forced confession.
This isn't just a movie. This is an interactive movie. So
Correct.
That's something that's slightly different from, again, watching a normal movie, is the fact that you can pick up the iPad and you can pick up the notes and you can read what the detectives have written, and you can look at clues about the murder as well, which makes it, again, comes back to that connection. And that's why if you've never seen a interactive movie, people, then this is definitely something that you should try out. And this is a great one to start on, because, as I say, it's a true event, and the interaction in it is just perfect for what you want. It's not too long. It's not like going to be sat there for hours and hours on end. As I say, you'll support it and you get hooked. I know I'm waiting for chapter 2. So what is your release dates planned for those then?
So the first step is obviously releasing this chapter 1, because it is a very different way of telling this type of a story. We definitely have to see how audience react to it. Now, assuming that it is fairly well received by audiences, then the plan is to film both episode 2 and 3, or chapter 2 and 3, back to back, and we would do that actually in around the month of May, and then we would release chapter 2 sometime in July, and chapter 3 about a month after that in August. So that's kind of the timeline. Again, based on seeing how audiences receive it. But I feel pretty confident. I think you hit the nail on the head. It is. I watch a lot of VR content, and obviously was inspired by VR content to create my own VR content. And I definitely think we have something that's very special here. I think the interactivity definitely makes it a much more immersive and engaging piece of content, as opposed to just a standard 3D video. And I think it's also really important to understand that a lot of those interactive things, particularly some of the cell phone messages, and as you mentioned, the detective notes, as well as the iPad. In fact, all of these elements are actually, they seem somewhat small, but as you start to see the story unfold, you start to realize that a lot of these things all have their place in eventually leading to this forced confession. And what's really interesting about the story is it's not a story in the sense of, oh, is this kid innocent or is he guilty? Well, again, if you do a quick Google search, you'll instantly find out that he was innocent. It was a wrongful conviction and all that. But the story is more about how does an innocent 16-year-old kid end up confessing to such a brutal act? You know, that's really the story, is how does that happen? And that's what we intimately explore, is how all of these pieces have to come together to eventually to have something like that happen.
I just want to add that, as we get into, further, further chapters, I mean, I'm interested also to explore, how does a wrongful conviction continue to get upheld, throughout the entire appeal process. I mean, I lost 7 appeals and then I got turned down for parole. So it wasn't simply a breakdown on the police level, on the prosecutor level, and ultimately at the trial level, but it's also a continuation of that injustice not being corrected throughout the appeal process. So I'm interested, in the series to explore that, and then what I became afterwards, after I was exonerated. I mean, becoming an advocate and having my nonprofit started, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which has been able to free 7 other wrongfully convicted people in our 6 years of existence, and being able to help pass 3 laws in New York aimed at preventing wrongful conviction, and then working within the broader coalition group, It Can Happen to You, where we were able to pass 3 additional laws and are now working in Pennsylvania and California to bring some changes about, as well as address some other issues in New York. So like those 2 aspects of the story are equally important to me.
That brings me on to the foundation, which I was going to talk about. So you've obviously, this has happened to you. You were young. You spent 16 years incarcerated. You've come out. Me personally, I would hate the world. I would just hate everybody, and I wouldn't. I don't know how I would cope. But you've come out and you've done something positive with it, and you've opened up this foundation. So do you want to explain why you've set up the foundation and what really the foundation is about?
Of course. Yeah, sure. So in terms of why I'm not angry, I mean, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I don't think that I can do that if I'm, angry or bitter. Another aspect is I feel like I lost so much. I mean, why would I want to, in effect, give over the rest of my life? And, the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. I started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice after I'd been home for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was an individual advocate. When you're exonerated, you're released without anything. So things were very difficult for me financially, but I did a lot of work as an individual advocate, from speaking to trading privacy for awareness by doing television, radio, print media interviews. I was meeting with elected officials and regularly, and I was also a columnist for 5 years for the Westchester Guardian. But after 5 years, I was able to get compensated, and I wanted to take my advocacy work to the next level. I felt like I couldn't forget about the men and women that I metaphorically left behind, who are in the same position that I was once in, and certainly exonerating people and freeing them was not something that I could do as an individual advocate. And so when I suddenly had some compensation, that's when I decided I wanted to go to the next level. So our mission is to free others who are wrongfully imprisoned and to pursue policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening in the first place. I mentioned our track record there in that. And while doing advocacy, I mean, I've done a lot of informal learning. I've paired that with my life experience and with formal education. I mean, I was blessed to get scholarship from Mercy College to finish the bachelor's degree, which I was 10 classes short of while I was incarcerated. I got a master's degree from John Jay College. My thesis was on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform. And after a while, after I got tired of just sitting in the front row of the courtroom, I wanted to be able to sit at the desk and at the defense table and be able to represent some of the clients myself. So I made a foray into law school, and I recently graduated this past May at the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University, and I passed the bar exam. So I have a couple of minor steps left, which will be done sometime between May and July, and then I'll get the law license, and I'll be a lawyer. But maybe just to sum up, I consider that my place in the world is to fight wrongful conviction. That's my purpose, and that's how I make sense of everything that happened to me. And that's why, doing advocacy work, it's not a hobby. I'm not a weekend warrior. I mean, I wake up and almost every day of the week, I do something advocacy wise, and it gives a lot of meaning to me. I think I'm making a difference. I feel like it's cathartic. It's healing, and it really feels warm to me when I meet people, whether it's an audience that I've just spoken at, or I just informally meet people, or even just talking with media, including people in new media, and just to get the warm reception, because I mean, prison's such a cold and hard place, and for a while I thought the world was just indifferent, that everybody was so caught up into their own individual pursuit of happiness that they couldn't be bothered with something that didn't directly affect them. And yet when I'm here in these different events, different experience, social experiences that I just spoke about, when I get like a warm reception from people, it's healing. It's a warm feeling, and I'm really great to be free and to be able to play my part in the struggle.
There is a lot of injustice out there, and obviously you're bringing this to the forefront. Look underneath the video here, you'll have all the links to everything and to the film itself. Now, it's available on the Oculus Store. It's been released, so guys, go out and buy it. I just want to say thank you very much for you both coming in. The name of the movie is...
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Peekskill.
In Peekskill. Okay. So...
Can I add, just have a closing thought? In terms of flat screen, there's an additional product. It's called Conviction. It's a 20-minute documentary that's in various film festivals. In the 8th, it'll be in New York Film Festival, and 26th, it'll be in LA, and of April. And March 29th, it'll be in New York Cinematography, and on the 7th, it'll be in Cannes. So if anyone's interested in seeing my story in more than one format, they can email me through the website. I'm happy to share that information. I just want to get my story out there and make a difference. And so I really appreciate the opportunity of doing the interview this morning.
No, we'd just like to thank you for coming on to the show, and both of you have been excellent. We really do wish you the success with the movie, and like I say, I can't wait for chapter 2 and chapter 3 and to see the rest of the story. So thank you very much. Guys, go out and buy it. Go and support more VR content, because that's what we're all here about. And well, tune in for our next show when we have someone else to interview and see what they're talking about in VR. So thank you very much, guys, for coming along.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
No worries. Okay, catch you later, guys.